Imagine buying a dollar bill for only 2 cents. That's what Mohnish Pabrai did with Reysaş, a Turkish logistics company that also builds and rents warehouses. And now, those dollar bills are worth 22 cents and growing. If you are watching this video, you probably already know who Mohnish Pabrai is and why he invested in Reysaş. I made a video about Reysaş before, but here is a quick recap. They are a logistics company that also operates a REIT called Reysaş GYO, which owns and manages their warehouse properties. Unlike most REITs in the US, Reysaş GYO does not pay any dividends. Instead, they invest all of their profits to build more warehouses. Let me show you Reysaş's real estate portfolio. As you can see, they have some land, some residential properties, and a hotel. But the vast majority of their assets are warehouses. The total value of their portfolio is 13.4 billion liras, and they have 2.3 billion liras in debt. So their net asset value is 11.1 billion liras. Their market cap is around 7 billion liras right now, so it looks like they are trading at a 60% discount to their net asset value. But that's not the whole story. There is more upside potential than you might think. Reysaş is laser focused on warehouses, but they are also opportunistic when they see a good deal. For example, when they couldn't get permission to build a warehouse on one of their plots in Izmir, they sold it and used the money to build another warehouse somewhere else. They are also very savvy when it comes to residential real estate. One of their most important assets this year is a residential project in Sancaktepe. In their portfolio, it shows that they have 30,000 square meters of building area, and the value of it is 238 million liras. But that's not what they are expecting to sell that for. In their annual report, they said that they plan to sell 12,000 square meters of that property for at least 50,000 liras per square meter this year. That means they could get more than 600 million liras from just 40% of that project, and that is the conservative estimate. Another thing I want to point out is that the Sancaktepe project is actually split in two assets in their portfolio. Together, they have more than 51,000 square meters of building area. If we assume that they can sell them for 50,000 liras per square meter, which is the lower price that they expect, then they could get 2.5 billion liras from those two assets. But in their portfolio, they are valued at only 457 million liras. That is a huge difference. And of course, these are just my rough estimates based on the information they have given us so far. We will have to wait and see how they will sell those properties. But I think that's very interesting. Now, you might have heard Mohnish Pabrai talk about Reysaş and how he values them by using a dollar per square foot metric for their portfolio. I think that's a valid way to value Reysaş, but also it is very difficult. First of all, Reysaş has real estate in different parts of Turkey, and some of them are in much better locations than others. For example, the plots in Istanbul or Kocaeli, which is very close to Istanbul, are worth much more than the ones in Adana. Secondly, some of their warehouses have solar panels on top of them, which generate extra income, but some of them don't have that. And thirdly, I actually tried to do this myself, but it was very hard to find out how much it would cost to rebuild their warehouses. It was like going down a rabbit hole. So I decided to use another approach to give them a rough estimate. We already know the value of their real estate properties on paper, and we also know how much rent they are getting from their tenants, because they disclose that information in their quarterly or annual reports. So I decided to keep track of those numbers and put them in an Excel file. But there was this one problem. The inflation rates in Turkey are very high, and Reysaş adjusts their rents according to inflation or rents them in foreign currencies like euros or dollars. So I only looked at the agreements that were made in the last year and a half. There were 16 new deals in total, and I put them all in Excel as I said. But 4 of them were especially very interesting. The first one was a warehouse in Kocaeli, which they rented 15% of it to a company called Seferim Güvende for 5 years. They will get 130 million liras from that deal. But the interesting part is the value of that warehouse in their portfolio is 816 million liras. So 15% of that would be 122 million liras. That means they are getting more than the value of the part they rented for 5 years of rent. The second one is also in Kocaeli. They rented half of a warehouse to a retail called Ampa for 5 years. They will be getting 305 million liras from this deal. But the interesting part is that the value of that warehouse in their portfolio is only 250 million liras. So half of that would be 108 million liras. That means they are getting almost 3 times the value of the part they rented for 5 years of rent. The next one is in Izmir, one of the major cities in Turkey. They are building a warehouse and renting it to Carrefour, and the warehouse is expected to be completed in July this year. So we should see it in their next quarterly report. But for now, the plot of land where the warehouse will be built is in their portfolio, and it is valued at 73.5 million liras. But Carrefour will pay 240 million liras for 5 years of rent. That is more than 3 times of the value of this land. And the final example is from the same warehouse as Ampa, but this time it's 30% of it that they rented to Mercedes, and they rented it in euros. But I converted it to liras for simplicity. For the first 5 years, Mercedes will pay 12 million euros that they cannot back out of. And for the next 6 years, if they want to continue renting, they will pay 21 million euros more. I don't know if they will do that, but I think it's a good deal for them. But I only used the rent for the first 5 years in my calculation. And also, the rent will increase with the inflation of euro as well. So at the end, that warehouse's valuation is 250 million liras in Reysaş's portfolio, and 30% of that would be 64.6 million liras. But Mercedes will pay 66 million liras annually to rent that space. That's more than the value of that space that they rented in just 1 year of rent. Of course, these are the best deals that they have made in the last 18 months, and they announced 16 deals in total. So not every deal is as amazing as these ones. Now, here is the file that I was talking about. As you can see, the ones that I highlighted have incredibly high yields, but there are also many deals with reasonable yields as well. And let me explain what I did here. In column D, there are the values of the warehouses in their portfolio. In column E, there are the percentages of how much of the warehouse they rented in each deal. In column F, there are the values of the rented space. In column G, there are the annual rents. And finally, in column H, there are the yields of the annual rents against the values of the rented spaces. So their average yield on their real estate is 12% for the last 18 months. But remember, this does not include the income from selling electricity from their solar panels to their tenants. And I don't have any source on this, but I think they have invested around $60 million to build those solar panels so far. And according to Bing, a 7% yield on real estate is considered a very good yield. And Reysaş's yield, as I said, is 12% for the last 18 months. Plus, they have extra income from solar panels. So I think it's fair to say that the value of their real estate portfolio should be 2.5 times higher than what it shows on paper. And as I said before, their portfolio value is 13.4 billion liras. So it should be 33.5 billion liras in reality, in my opinion. And if we subtract their debt of 2.3 billion liras from that, we get 31.2 billion liras. That is the number that I came up with for their liquidation value. And I showed you how I got here. You might have a different number, and that's fine. Unless Reysaş decides to liquidate, it is all speculation. Their market value is, as I said before, around 7 billion liras. So they are trading at around 22% of their liquidation value. In dollar terms, 31.2 billion liras is about 1.2 billion, and their market cap is around $270 million. Also, Reysaş Logistics owns 61.94% of this company. So their share would be around $750 million in dollar terms. And Reysaş Logistics has many other businesses as well. So their intrinsic value would be even higher in my opinion. You can watch my video on Reysaş Logistics as well. I will put a link in the cards and in the description. And before we end this video, there is a very important thing you need to know if you own Reysaş Logistics. They are raising capital from their investors. So you will need to pay 1 Turkish lira for every share you own in Reysaş Logistics. So if you own 1000 shares, you will need to pay 1000 liras, which is about $39. And I strongly recommend that you pay that amount if you're an investor in the company, even if you have to sell some shares to cover that. Because if you don't pay it, your ownership in the company will be diluted by half. We are still waiting for the details of this capital raise, and once they are announced, make sure to contact your broker. I might also make a video about it in the future, so make sure to subscribe. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. I'll see you in the next one.